It was a chilly autumn evening when Margaret first heard the whispers. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, leaving the historic park shrouded in darkness, save for the faint glow of the old lampposts that lined the winding paths. The park had always been a place of solitude for her, a haven from the chaos of the world. But that night, as she sat on a weathered bench beneath the gnarled branches of an ancient oak, she felt something shift. The air grew colder, the silence heavier, and then she heard it. Like the rustling of leaves, but with words she could not quite make out. Her heart quickened as she scanned the empty park, but there was no one in sight. The whispers grew louder, and with them, an overwhelming sense of unease. Margaret hurriedly gathered her belongings and left the park, the whispers following her until she reached the safety of her home. Little did she know, Margaret was not the first to experience the unsettling presence in the park. For over a century, the historic park had been the site of numerous reports of paranormal disturbances, whispers in the night, shadowy figures that vanish upon approach, and an inexplicable feeling of being watched. Tonight, I will take you on a journey through the haunted history of this seemingly tranquil park, where the past refuses to rest, and the spirits of those long gone still wander the paths they once walked in life.
Welcome, dear listeners, to another chilling episode of Wicked Whispers, where the shadows come alive and nightmares whisper their secrets.
The historic park, known today as Greenwood Park, was established in the early 19th century on the outskirts of a growing town. The land, with its lush greenery, towering trees, and serene lake, was intended to be a place of relaxation and reflection for the townspeople. But beneath its picturesque surface lay a dark and troubled history. Long before the park was built, the land had been the site of a brutal and bloody battle during the Revolutionary War. The battle, known locally as the Battle of Greenwood, was a fierce and deadly conflict between the British Redcoats and the American Patriots. The fighting was intense, and many lives were lost on both sides. By the end of the day, the once verdant fields were stained with blood, and the bodies of the fallen lay scattered across the landscape. The land was left untouched for decades, with the memory of the battle fading into local folklore. But as the town expanded, the need for public spaces grew, and the land was eventually purchased by a wealthy landowner named William Barrett. Barrett, a man with a keen interest in landscaping and horticulture, envisioned a grand public park that would serve as a refuge for the townspeople. Construction of Greenwood Park began in 1823, with Barrett personally overseeing every detail. The park was designed to be a place of beauty and tranquility, with carefully manicured lawns, flower gardens, and winding paths that led to secluded groves and picturesque viewpoints. But as the park took shape, strange occurrences began to plague the construction site. Workers reported hearing the sound of marching feet in the dead of night, accompanied by the distant clanging of swords and the cries of battle. Tools would go missing, only to be found later in strange, inexplicable locations. Some workers even claimed to see shadowy figures moving through the trees, figures that would disappear as soon as they were approached. Barrett, a pragmatic man, dismissed these reports as mere superstition, the result of overactive imaginations. But as the incidents continued, the workers grew increasingly uneasy, and many began to believe that the land was cursed. Despite the growing fear, the construction of the park was completed in 1825, and Greenwood Park was officially opened to the public. One of the most famous legends associated with Greenwood Park is that of the Lady in White. The story dates back to the mid-19th century when the park was still relatively new. According to local lore, the Lady in White was the ghost of a young woman named Emily, who had lived in the town during the early years of the park's existence. Emily was the daughter of a prominent local family, and she was known for her beauty and grace. She was engaged to be married to a young soldier named James, who had fought in the Mexican-American War. The two were deeply in love, and their wedding was eagerly anticipated by the entire town. But tragedy struck on the eve of their wedding day. James, who had returned to town only a few weeks earlier, was found dead under mysterious circumstances. His body was discovered near the edge of the park, his face pale and his eyes wide open in a look of sheer terror. There were no signs of injury, and the cause of death was never determined. Emily was devastated by James's death, and she spent the following weeks in a state of deep mourning. She would often visit the spot where his body was found, dressed in her wedding gown, her face pale and her eyes filled with sorrow. On the night that was supposed to be her wedding, Emily disappeared without a trace. The townspeople searched for her, but she was never found. Some believed that she had taken her own life in her grief, while others whispered that she had been taken by the spirits that haunted the park. In the years that followed, reports of a ghostly figure dressed in white began to circulate. The figure, believed to be Emily, was often seen wandering the paths of the park at night, her eyes fixed on the spot where James had died. Witnesses described her as a beautiful young woman with long, flowing hair and a pale, sorrowful expression. She was always seen in her wedding gown, the fabric shimmering in the moonlight. Those who encountered her reported feeling a deep sense of sadness and despair, as if her grief was too powerful to be contained. The Lady in White became one of the park's most enduring legends, and many visitors came to the park in the hopes of catching a glimpse of her ghostly form. Some claimed to hear her weeping softly in the night, while others reported seeing her standing by the edge of the lake, her gaze fixed on the water as if searching for something or someone lost to her. The Battle of Greenwood left a deep scar on the land, and it is said that the spirits of those who died in the battle still roam the park to this day. Over the years, countless visitors and park workers have reported seeing ghostly apparitions of soldiers dressed in Revolutionary War uniforms, their faces etched with pain and fear. These phantom soldiers are often seen marching in formation, their ghostly figures barely visible in the dim light of dawn or dusk. Some witnesses have reported hearing the distant sound of drums and fifes, playing the same martial tunes that would have been heard on the battlefield over 2 centuries ago. The most famous encounter with the phantom soldiers occurred in the early 20th century when a group of park workers stumbled upon a scene that left them shaken to the core. The men were working near the site of the old battlefield when they heard the sound of marching feet. As they turned to investigate, they saw a group of ghostly soldiers emerging from the mist, their faces grim and determined. The soldiers marched in perfect formation, their weapons at the ready, as if they were preparing for battle. The workers watched in stunned silence as the apparitions passed by them, their figures fading into the trees. When the men finally found the courage to move, they quickly left the area, and none of them ever spoke of the incident again. But the legend of the phantom soldiers continued to grow, and many visitors to the park reported similar encounters. Some even claimed to see the ghostly figures reenacting the battle, their swords clashing in the air and their cries of pain echoing through the park. Despite the many reports, no physical evidence of the phantom soldiers has ever been found. But those who have witnessed the apparitions are convinced that the spirits of the soldiers are still fighting the battle that took their lives, unable to find peace on the land that became their final resting place. In the center of Greenwood Park stands an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches reaching out like twisted arms. The tree is known as the Cursed Tree, and it is said to be the source of much of the paranormal activity in the park. The origins of the curse are unclear, but local legend has it that the tree was planted on the site of an old gallows, where criminals were hanged in the years before the park was built. According to the story, the spirits of those who were executed on the gallows were trapped within the tree, their anger and despair seeping into the wood. Over the years, the cursed tree became a place of fear and superstition. Those who dared to approach the tree at night reported feeling a sense of dread, as if they were being watched by unseen eyes. Some claimed to hear the sound of creaking ropes and the gasps of the condemned, while others saw shadowy figures hanging from the branches. One of the most chilling stories associated with the cursed tree involves a young man named Thomas, who visited the park with a group of friends one summer night. The group, skeptical of the supernatural, decided to test the legend by spending the night near the tree. They laughed and joked as they set up their camp, but as the night wore on, the mood grew more somber. Around midnight, Thomas decided to approach the tree. As he drew closer, he felt a sudden chill in the air, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Ignoring the feeling, he reached out to touch the tree, but as soon as his hand made contact with the bark, he was overcome with a sense of overwhelming terror. Thomas screamed and fell to the ground, clutching his chest as if in pain. His friends rushed to his side, but he was unable to speak, his eyes wide with fear. They quickly gathered their belongings and left the park, carrying Thomas with them. He was taken to the hospital, where he was treated for shock, but he never fully recovered from the experience. In the years that followed, Thomas became a recluse, refusing to speak of what had happened that night. He spent most of his days indoors, avoiding the park and anything that reminded him of the cursed tree. Those who knew him said that he was never the same after that night, his once bright spirit dimmed by the encounter. The legend of the cursed tree continues to be a source of fascination and fear for visitors to Greenwood Park. Some brave souls have attempted to spend the night near the tree, but most leave before the night is over, driven away by the same sense of dread that has haunted the park for centuries. Greenwood Park is home to a beautiful, serene lake that reflects the sky and trees like a mirror. But beneath its calm surface lies a dark and tragic history. The lake, known as Mirror Lake, has been the site of several drownings over the years, and it is said that the spirits of those who died in its waters still linger, unable to find peace. One of the most famous stories associated with Mirror Lake is that of a young woman named Lily, who drowned in the lake under mysterious circumstances in the late 19th century. Lily was known for her beauty and charm, and she was a popular figure in the town. She was engaged to be married to a wealthy businessman, but the marriage was not a happy one, and it was said that Lily was deeply unhappy in her relationship. One summer evening, Lily was seen walking along the edge of the lake, her face pale and her eyes distant. She was never seen alive again. Her body was discovered the next morning, floating in the water, her white dress billowing around her like a shroud. The cause of death was ruled as drowning, but there were no signs of struggle, and no one could explain how she had ended up in the lake. After Lily's death, reports of a ghostly figure appearing near the lake began to circulate. Witnesses described seeing a woman dressed in white, her hair dripping wet, standing by the water's edge. Some claimed that she would beckon to them, her eyes filled with sorrow, as if she were asking for help. Others said that they heard her voice, calling out from the depths of the lake, begging for someone to save her. The ghost of Lily became one of the park's most famous legends, and many visitors came to Mirror Lake in the hopes of seeing her spirit. Some even claimed to have captured her image in photographs, her ghostly figure faintly visible in the background. But the haunting of Mirror Lake is not limited to Lily's ghost. Over the years, several other drownings have occurred in the lake, and it is said that the spirits of those who died have joined Lily in her eternal vigil. Visitors to the lake often report feeling a sense of unease, as if they are being watched from beneath the water's surface. Some have even claimed to see ghostly hands reaching out from the water, as if trying to pull them in. Despite its beauty, Mirror Lake remains a place of mystery and fear, a reminder that even the most serene places can hold dark secrets. One of the most disturbing legends associated with Greenwood Park is that of the vanishing children. The story dates back to the early 20th century when the park was a popular destination for families and children. According to the legend, several children went missing in the park over the course of a few years, their disappearances never explained. The first child to go missing was a young boy named Samuel, who was last seen playing near the edge of the park's forest. His parents searched for him frantically, but there was no trace of him to be found. The search continued for weeks, but Samuel was never found, and his disappearance became a cold case. Over the next few years, several other children went missing under similar circumstances. Each time, the child would be playing in the park, only to vanish without a trace. The disappearances caused widespread panic, and the park was temporarily closed as authorities conducted a thorough investigation. But no evidence was ever found, and the park was eventually reopened. The disappearances stopped as suddenly as they had begun, but the memory of the vanishing children lingered. Over the years, visitors to the park began to report seeing the ghostly figures of children playing in the distance. The children were always described as being pale and silent, their faces blank and their eyes hollow. Some witnesses claimed that the ghostly children would approach them, only to vanish as they drew near. Others reported hearing the sound of children's laughter, only to find that they were alone in the park. The most chilling accounts came from those who said they felt a small, cold hand slip into theirs, only to turn and find no one there. The legend of the vanishing children remains one of the most unsettling stories associated with Greenwood Park. Despite the passage of time, the memory of those lost children continues to haunt the park, their spirits still searching for the way home. One of the most terrifying entities associated with Greenwood Park is known simply as the Shadow Man. Unlike the other ghosts and spirits that haunt the park, the Shadow Man is a malevolent presence, a figure of pure darkness that seems to feed on fear. The first reported sighting of the Shadow Man occurred in the 1950s when a young couple was walking through the park late at night. They described seeing a tall, shadowy figure standing under a lamppost, its form indistinct and its features obscured. As they approached, the figure began to move towards them, its shape shifting and flickering like a flame. The couple fled in terror, and when they looked back, the shadow man was gone. But the encounter left them deeply shaken, and they refused to return to the park. In the years that followed, more sightings of the shadow man were reported. Witnesses described the figure as being tall and thin, with long arms and a featureless face. The shadow man was always seen at night, lurking in the darkest corners of the park, watching and waiting. Those who encountered the shadow man reported feeling a deep sense of dread and despair, as if their very souls were being drained. Some claimed that the figure would follow them, its presence growing stronger the longer they remained in the park. Others said that they saw the shadow man in their dreams, his dark form a constant, inescapable presence. The shadow man has become one of the most feared entities in Greenwood Park, and many visitors avoid the park at night, fearing an encounter with the malevolent spirit. Some believe that the shadow man is the embodiment of all the dark energy that has accumulated in the park over the centuries, a manifestation of the pain, fear, and death that have marked its history. Over the years, Greenwood Park has attracted the attention of numerous paranormal investigators, drawn by its reputation as one of the most haunted locations in the region. These investigators have conducted numerous investigations, using a variety of tools and techniques to try and capture evidence of the park's ghostly inhabitants. One of the most famous investigations took place in the 1980s when a team of investigators spent several nights in the park, using cameras, audio recorders, and other equipment to document any paranormal activity. The investigation yielded several pieces of evidence, including unexplained voices, strange lights, and even a few photographs that appeared to show ghostly figures. The investigators also conducted interviews with park workers and visitors, gathering stories and accounts of their experiences. Many of the stories matched up with the legends and tales that had been passed down through the generations, reinforcing the belief that the park was indeed haunted. Despite the evidence, there are still many who remain skeptical of the paranormal activity in Greenwood Park. Some believe that the stories are simply the result of overactive imaginations, fueled by the park's dark history. But for those who have experienced the hauntings firsthand, there is no doubt that something otherworldly is at work in Greenwood Park. Today, Greenwood Park remains a popular destination for locals and tourists alike. Despite its haunted reputation, the park's beauty and tranquility continue to draw visitors, many of whom are unaware of the dark history that lies beneath the surface. But for those who know the stories, the park is a place of mystery and fear, a place where the past and present collide in eerie and unsettling ways. The ghosts of Greenwood Park continue to haunt the park's paths and groves, their presence felt by those who dare to venture into the shadows. Whether it's the Lady in White, the Phantom Soldiers, the Vanishing Children, or the malevolent Shadow Man, the spirits of Greenwood Park are a reminder that the past is never truly gone. The park is a place where the dead still walk, and where the echoes of history can still be heard in the whispers of the wind and the rustling of the leaves. As the sun sets and the darkness descends, Greenwood Park becomes a place of shadows and secrets, a place where the living and the dead coexist in a delicate balance. And for those who are brave enough to enter, the park offers a glimpse into a world where the line between the living and the dead is blurred, and where the spirits of the past still linger, waiting for those who will listen to their stories. The haunting of Greenwood Park is a tale that has been passed down through the generations, a story that has grown and evolved with each retelling. But at its core, it is a story of a place where the past refuses to rest, where the spirits of those long gone still wander the paths they once walked in life. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there is no denying the sense of unease that pervades Greenwood Park. It is a place where the shadows seem darker, where the air feels colder, and where the silence is filled with the echoes of the past. And as long as the park stands, the ghosts of Greenwood Park will continue to haunt its paths, their presence a reminder that the past is never truly gone.